Leave it, leave it.
I think like a truck or something.
Leave it, leave it, leave it. I hit a nice...
So sick. We later found that the Bugatti, it was impossible to buy parts directly from them.
On that chassis number of vehicle, they will not supply any component through a Bugatti dealership.
They didn't say difficult. They didn't say expensive. They said impossible. A Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport
It's the Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport. One of the most expensive Bugattis ever made. It's a more track-focused, lightweight version of the Chiron, and they only made 60 of them.
locked down, blacklisted, and declared beyond repair by the factory that built it. VIN frozen, parts denied, support cut off at the source. On paper, the story was over before it even began. But in a workshop in Miami, Matt Armstrong and Alex Gonzalez decided not to accept that ending. So here's the question that changes everything. What happens when two men take on a machine that even its creators refuse to fix? Because what followed wasn't a repair job. It was a challenge. And Bugatti was about to find out that impossible is not a stop sign. It's a starting point. From crash to controversy. The Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport at the center of this story is one of approximately 60 ever produced. That number matters because it means every single example destroyed or permanently removed from the road represents a mathematically significant reduction in the total population of these machines. When new, a Chiron Pur Sport commands between $4 and $4.5 million. At that production volume and at that price point, every car has a name, a history, and an owner who is known to the factory personally. The owner who crashed this particular car was Alex Gonzalez.
How I bought my Bugatti back, how I really crashed, how Bugatti is basically cornering me and giving me an ultimatum, and how parts were stolen off of my Bugatti and how I got them back by one simple message. Oh, and obviously the game plan with what we're gonna do with the Bugatti.
Known online as FXLXG, a content creator and car collector based in Miami. After the accident, his insurance company paid out the claim and the car was sent to a Copart salvage auction as a declared total loss. What Alex did next is the decision that nobody in the automotive world understood. He bid on his own former car at the salvage auction and bought it back for approximately $1.6 million, with total costs including fees reaching roughly $1.9 million. He was buying back the wreck of his own hypercar at a significant discount from its intact value with the specific intention of bringing it back to life. The damage was severe and genuinely complex. The front end had taken a serious impact. The airbags had deployed.
Airbags, basically a brand new Bugatti, and it will be stamped by Bugatti, certified, rebuilt by Bugatti.
Carbon fiber panels were cracked across multiple surfaces. The headlights were destroyed. The iconic Bugatti horseshoe grille was gone. And most critically, the gearbox transmission mounts had suffered significant structural damage. Not hairline cracks, but real fractures that raised fundamental questions about the integrity of the carbon fiber monocoque, the structural spine of the entire vehicle. When carbon fiber cracks, the question of whether those cracks compromise the entire structure is not academic. It is the difference between a car that is safe to drive and a car that is a $4 million coffin. Bugatti flew a technician from their headquarters in Molsheim, France to inspect the car. Their initial quote for a factory restoration was approximately $1.7 million. Alex declined. Bugatti came back with a reduced figure of around $600,000. Alex declined that too. And it was at that moment that Bugatti made the decision that transformed a straightforward rebuild dispute into a global story. Blacklist that started a war. They locked the VIN. Every Bugatti dealership on the planet was instructed that no official part could be sold for this specific vehicle. The car was blacklisted from its own manufacturer's supply chain. And it is worth pausing on what that actually means in practice, because the implications go far beyond one car and one owner. The Chiron Pur Sport contains approximately 1,900 components that cannot be sourced from any generic parts supplier. The turbochargers,
that tends to kill the sound, along with the firing order and loads of different aspects.
the sequential gearbox, the carbon ceramic brake system, the rear wheel steering assembly, the bespoke suspension geometry, the horseshoe intake structure that feeds all four of the W16's turbochargers. None of those parts exist in the aftermarket. Bugatti makes them specifically for Bugatti cars, and Bugatti decides who gets to buy them. When they locked that VIN, they were not simply declining to assist with a repair. They were actively removing the possibility of a standard repair process from existence. They were telling a man who had paid nearly $2 million for his own property that his property could not be fixed without their permission and at their price. And then Alex Gonzalez called Matt Armstrong. Matt Armstrong is a YouTuber from the north of England who has built a channel of over 6 million subscribers and hundreds of millions of total views by doing exactly one thing: rebuilding cars that other people say cannot be rebuilt. Lamborghinis, Ferraris, machines that specialist dealerships refuse to touch. He buys them wrecked, documents every step of the restoration, and puts them back on the road. His audience is not casual viewers looking for entertainment. They are technically engaged enthusiasts who watch for the engineering, the problem-solving, and the satisfaction of seeing someone refuse to accept no for an answer. Matt arrived in Miami in late 2025, inspected the car, looked at the damage, and said on camera the 5 words that set the entire project in motion: "I think we can rebuild this." And then Alex posted a message on Instagram that turned a private dispute into a public confrontation. "Bugatti, you have 24 hours to unblacklist this car, or we will 3D print all parts." The post was equal parts genuine threat and theatrical dare, designed to force a response from a company that had been comfortable with the silence the blacklist created. Most manufacturers would have ignored it. Bugatti did not. Mate Rimac, the CEO of Bugatti Rimac, sent Alex a direct message that began with what has since become one of the most unexpectedly memorable corporate openings in recent automotive history. "Hey man, Bugatti CEO here." He explained why 3D printing was not viable for structural components, pointed out that the gearbox and monocoque were likely damaged beyond what a private shop could safely address, and made the case that this car required factory-level intervention. His points were technically sound. He was not wrong about the engineering realities of what a Chiron Pur Sport requires to function safely. A 1/500 to 1/600 horsepower machine with a compromised structural chassis is a genuinely dangerous object, and the manufacturer's concern about future owners driving a car that was rebuilt without factory oversight is a legitimate engineering concern, not simply a commercial one. But accuracy and fairness are not the same thing. And the parts blacklist that preceded Rimac's public intervention told the fuller story of what Bugatti's position actually was. They had not just declined to help, they had actively prevented anyone else from helping either. That is not a safety position, that is a control position. And the distinction between the two is exactly what this story exposed. A phone call followed the DM exchange, and Bugatti officially unblacklisted the car. The VIN was unlocked. Parts could theoretically be ordered again.
Parts of this Bugatti that we're going to need, like shrouding and plastic covers, and they're going to take a long time to make.
But the factory support that would have made the hardest parts of the rebuild straightforward never materialized in the way Alex and Matt needed it to. The unblacklisting was a concession, not a collaboration. The VIN was unlocked, but the doors to Molsheim remained closed. They were going to have to solve the biggest problems themselves. And the biggest problem of all was about to reveal itself when they got underneath the car properly for the first time. Precision versus permission. Bugatti had made a specific public claim that became the defining challenge of the entire rebuild. Splitting the chassis of a Chiron.
Chassis number for that Chiron with Bugatti to see whether we could get the parts supplied to you to repair the vehicle.
Which is a necessary step for accessing and repairing the gearbox, was something that only their state-of-the-art proprietary facilities at their Molsheim headquarters could handle. The implication was clear without being stated directly. If you do not have access to those facilities, you cannot do this job. Period. Matt Armstrong and his father Tony, who had joined the project in Miami, listened to that assessment and then found a solution using a 2-post lift and the wheeled base from a garbage bin. They used those improvised components to support and separate the chassis sections, achieving the split that Bugatti had characterized as requiring specialized facilities in a regular shop with tools that had nothing to do with hypercar manufacturing. The internet watched it happen in real time. A garbage bin wheelbase supporting half of a $4 million Bugatti, while 2 men from England performed a procedure that the manufacturer said required a factory in France. Once the chassis was split, Matt inspected the carbon tub directly and assessed the actual extent of the structural damage.
That damage there is the damage to the carbon tub, which Bugatti quoted to replace the whole tub because of this. I think we could repair it.
What he found was that while there was damage to the carbon tub, most of it was minor and reparable without compromising the structural safety of the vehicle. The catastrophic failure that Bugatti's public statements had implied was the inevitable outcome of a DIY rebuild did not materialize as the primary finding. The gearbox was the bigger problem, and accessing it had required splitting the chassis, which they had now accomplished with a garbage bin and a lift. The broken gearbox section was extracted. The team now had a clear picture of what they were actually dealing with as opposed to what the external damage had suggested. For every component that could not be purchased through official channels, Matt's approach was methodical and precise. He 3D scanned the damaged originals to create exact digital models, then used CNC machining to fabricate replacements from appropriate materials. This is not the same as 3D printing, and the distinction matters enormously. CNC machining from verified skin data produces components with the dimensional accuracy and material properties that the application demands. It is the approach used by engineering firms rebuilding rare vehicles where original parts have become unobtainable. Mate Rimac had said it was impossible to 3D print parts for a Bugatti. He was right. Matt was not 3D printing. He was using 3D scanning as a measurement tool and CNC machining as the fabrication method. Bugatti's public framing had blurred that distinction, whether intentionally or not. Audi A3 airbags turned out to be compatible with the Chiron's deployment system.
A3, 8V, whether it's RS3, S3 or A3, providing all have the exact same part number airbag.
Custom radiators were fabricated to replace the 10 originals that the crash had destroyed, because a W16 engine pushing 1600 horsepower generates heat at a scale that requires a cooling infrastructure most people have never had to think about. Valvetronic built a custom exhaust. E3 Customs rebuilt the interior completely, retrimming everything to match the original white and purple color scheme. None of these solutions were on the approved Bugatti parts list. All of them worked. Engine that ended the argument. In a Miami workshop that was never designed to handle this level of engineering complexity, a highly controversial automotive rebuild reached its defining moment. The first restart of the Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport's engine after a catastrophic crash. At the center of the project is the 8.0-liter quad-turbo W16 inside the Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport, one of the most intricate production engines ever created. With 4 turbochargers, 1600 horsepower in its Pur Sport configuration, and a tightly engineered cooling and airflow system, it represents the peak of combustion-era hypercar design. It is not an engine that forgives errors. Every component alignment, every sensor reading, every pressure tolerance matters. After months of setbacks, sourcing issues, and engineering challenges, the rebuild finally reached a point where the engine could be tested. This was not a standard repair process. Major structural damage from the crash had forced the team to fabricate and adapt components outside of factory supply channels, including a custom exhaust system designed to replace the original unit that was destroyed in the accident. When ignition finally happened, the workshop changed instantly. The W16 fired, caught, and stabilized into a deep, aggressive idle. The sound was not the refined, muted tone typically associated with a factory Bugatti Chiron. Instead, the modified exhaust gave it a rawer, more mechanical voice, less filtered, more exposed, and noticeably louder. For those in the room, it was the first undeniable confirmation that the rebuild had crossed from theory into reality. The moment carried weight beyond engineering. Millions had followed the project online through detailed documentation by automotive creator Matt Armstrong, where every stage, from the salvage auction purchase to chassis inspection and reassembly, had been shared publicly. What made this rebuild compelling was not just the car itself, but the question behind it. Could a hypercar designed with near-clinical factory precision be revived outside its official ecosystem? The engine start answered that question in the most direct way possible. It also had financial implications. The car was originally purchased at salvage auction for a fraction of its market value, despite being a limited production model with only 60 Pur Sport units ever made. In the collector market, intact examples of the Chiron Pur Sport regularly trade in the multi-million-dollar range, driven by rarity and performance prestige. Even with the cost of repairs, fabrication, and specialist labor added in, a successful restoration could still place the project in a strong financial position. But beyond value or views, the significance of the moment was simpler. A machine that was supposed to be finished had started again. Not in a factory, not under ideal conditions, but in a workshop where persistence replaced permission, and where sound became the final proof that the impossible had been temporarily undone. When ownership became a question, the view counts on this rebuild series did not grow gradually. They spiked with each major development. The VIN blacklist confirmation, the CEO's DM going public, the garbage bin chassis split, the engine start. Each episode generated the kind of organic sharing behavior that algorithms reward and that no paid media campaign can manufacture. People were not just watching. They were sending the videos to friends and family who had never heard of Matt Armstrong and had no particular interest in hypercars. They were sharing them because the story at the center of the rebuild was never really about a car. It was about who gets to decide what you can do with something you own. That question touches every person who has ever been told by a manufacturer, a software company, a phone maker, or a dealership that a product they paid for cannot be repaired in the way they choose. The right to repair movement has been building across industries for years, from consumer electronics to agricultural machinery. John Deere has faced years of legal and legislative pressure over restrictions that prevent farmers from repairing their own tractors. Apple fought a prolonged public battle over independent iPhone repair before eventually loosening some restrictions under regulatory pressure. The principle is the same across all of these fights. When you buy something, do you own it? Or does the manufacturer retain a veto over what you can do with it? The Bugatti Chiron rebuild was the most dramatic and most visible example of that conflict in the automotive space. It showed, on camera, what happens when a manufacturer's parts monopoly meets an owner's determination to exercise their legal rights over their own property. The fact that the car costs several $1,000,000 and the owner is a wealthy content creator did not diminish the principle. If anything, it made the principle clearer. Because if financial resources alone are not enough to override a manufacturer's control over their supply chain, if a man with $2 million and a 6 million subscriber platform still had to fight this hard to repair his own car, then what chance does an ordinary consumer have? Mate Rimac eventually softened his public position. He reframed his earlier intervention as a safety concern rather than a commercial one, and suggested the relationship with the rebuild team had become more collaborative than the initial exchanges suggested. He compared his dynamic with Armstrong to the Messi and Ronaldo framing, two people operating at a high level with the internet manufacturing more conflict than actually existed. Whether that reframing was entirely accurate is debatable, but it acknowledged something that no amount of corporate messaging could undo. The rebuild had happened. The engine had started. And the public conversation about what manufacturers can and cannot do when they decide a car is beyond saving had been permanently changed by what two men put on camera in a Miami workshop. And yet, even now, with the engine alive and the impossible already rewritten, one question still lingers in the air of that Miami workshop. If a machine designed to be untouchable can be dismantled, rebuilt, and brought back to life outside the system that created it, what else in this world is being called impossible simply because someone benefits from it staying that way? Because this was never just about a Bugatti. It was about control, about permission, about who gets to decide when a story ends. And if that decision can be challenged here, then where does it stop?